Hey, what's up, guys? This is Gavin Schall of the Locked On Knicks podcast, and today I'm going to be joined by Evan Dammarell. He is the co-host of Locked On Cavs. He is the editor-in-chief of the fantastic Cavs website, Fear the Sword, and we are talking a potential Alec Burks to the Cavs trade, why the Knicks might be able to get slightly more than you think. Quick caveat, we did record this episode a week ago, so some of the time references might be slightly off, but you will get the idea and you will certainly enjoy it. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Evan Dammarell.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, guys, as promised, we are now joined by Evan Dammarell. You might know him most for hosting the Locked On Cavs podcast for WKYC, but he also covers Cleveland sports for Meta Bulletin's Right Down Euclid. He's also the editor of the fantastic Cavs site, Fear the Sword, and he provides gambling advice for Play Ohio. Evan, welcome to the show, and let me be, I'm sure, the first of many this year to congratulate you on the Cleveland Cavaliers' success, a 115-99 victory over the Milwaukee Bucks last night, leaving the Cavs in sole possession of third place in the Eastern Conference. So good for you, man. Good for you.
Oh, thank you. Well, no, I need to hire you as like a personal hype man. Jeez Louise, that was quite the intro there. But yeah, no, thank you. It's weird times, fun times in Cleveland again. If you are an old school YouTuber, if you know the Cleveland tourism video, but yeah, it's weird to think. I think the expectations just were so low this season for the Cavs that it's just been a lot of fun every step of the way.
Yeah, I'm in my mind, like I was going to come in and frame it like, wow, the Cavs are finally good. It's incredible. And I'm like, wait, you guys won a championship like 5 years ago. Like,
yeah, the window, it's weird because everyone asks me like, oh, what are your expectations? Like, man, they just won a championship 5 years ago. I'm good. Like, they could be crappy for the rest of my life. I'll still watch them.
I would say the same thing if the Knicks had won a championship in the last 5 years. Unfortunately, it's been 5 decades, but that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about a trade that could bring both teams a little bit closer to the championship. So I think this is sort of a weird thing to say, right? Because expectations were relatively low for Cleveland coming into this season, but you look at it retroactively. If this team had stayed fully healthy, Ricky Rubio, Colin Sexton were not out for the year, this is one of the more complete rosters in the NBA. Maybe not one with genuine title aspirations given the age of their key pieces, but just up and down, like not really a weak spot there. Given those injuries, am I right in saying that Cleveland could probably use one more guard / wing either off the bench or maybe even in the starting lineup if they want to have slightly higher aspirations this year than maybe they currently do?
Yeah, I think you're 100% spot on that, because especially when you look at the grand scheme of the Eastern Conference as well, like they're ahead of Milwaukee, they're ahead of Brooklyn, they're ahead of Philly right now. They have yet to play Philly this season. I think Philly is going to make some moves at the deadline. I wonder what Brooklyn and Milwaukee are going to do as well. Like there's going to be a lot of jockeying and posturing. Chicago is obviously going to remain a threat. Like the Cavs might be fighting with them for the Central Division title. Like we need to be a little bit realistic. This is a young Cavs team as well. Losing Colin Sexton and Ricky Rubio for the year makes it tough. I think you're putting a lot of pressure on Darius Garland, who's having back problems right now. And I think if you want to kind of mitigate that risk, you need to make a move to kind of support Darius, support the other key pillars, and Evan Mobley and Jerry Allen as well. And I think it'd be remiss of Cleveland not to make a trade because you have 2 roster spots filled up with 2 guys that aren't playing for the rest of the year, one of which is on an expiring contract, Ricky Rubio, and depending on how they feel about Colin Sexton, maybe you grease the wheels on the trade with him as well. But if you really want to go all in on the season, you need to make some moves. And I'm 100% a proponent of that just because Garland might run out of steam if you expect him to play 35, 40 minutes a night. And this is a marathon, not a sprint this season. And you don't want to like force the issue now and then worry about like what the repercussions of your actions are at the end of the year. Like, let's make a move now and make it a little easier on this Cavs team.
So maybe not a specific guy, but if you were to give me an archetype of a player that would essentially fill Cleveland's needs perfectly, obviously like sub-superstar level, what's the type of guy the Cavs want to add to their team?
I mean, honestly, like a perfect day at the office for the Cavs in terms of trades would be like bringing back Karis LeVert and maybe Dennis Schroeder as well, because obviously Rajon Rondo covers some of the gaps that losing Ricky Rubio had, but you need to bring in more playmaking, I think, as well, maybe a bit more of a scoring punch. If we're focusing on the Knicks, former Cavalier Alec Burks, if you're able to get him to come back to Cleveland somehow, some way, I think you're starting the conversation a little bit in terms of that scoring punch, in terms of 3-point shooting, in terms of playmaking, like a little bit of that. Obviously, you're not going to be able to completely recoup what Colin Sexton and Ricky Rubio brought to the table, but you need to find something to kind of just give the Cavs a shot in the arm.
So Alec Burks was exactly the name who I was going to bring up. We were bringing up in all these little segments that we were doing. And maybe he's sort of your discount Karis LeVert, a guy in November. And I think this distinction is key because in November he got to playoff Derrick Rose. In January he has not gotten to playoff Derrick Rose. So playing off of Derrick Rose, he over a 15-game stretch he shot 46% from three. At one point was top 5 in the NBA. In that category is 44% from the field, 12 points per game, about 4 or 5 rebounds, about 2 or 3 assists a night. In January, I think having worn down quite a bit by Tom Thibodeau, sort of positioning him as one of the Knicks' 2 or 3 most important players. And at times this year, he has been the Knicks' most important player, which you know as well as I do, he is not necessarily qualified for. So in January, over 13 games, 29% from the field, 28% from three, 8.5 points per game. That being said, I think in Cleveland's infrastructure, to your point, playing off of Darius Garland, a burgeoning all-star at the point guard position, someone the Knicks could have had, but we would be a very different guy. And I think you would see someone who has developed himself over the course of his career into an elite shooter, a really strong secondary creator, a smart passer, one of the craftier scorers in the NBA for someone who's consistently been right under like 16 points per game for his career. And solid enough defensively, not someone who like opposing offenses are going to be attempting to isolate against in the postseason. Given all that, what do you think a fair deal for Alec Burks would be? Because I think Knicks fans, especially before this recent stretch of poor play, had aspirations of getting a late first-round pick back for Alec Burks. I know Cedi Osman is probably the contract that makes the most sense in a Burks deal. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But what do you think that would look like from a Cavs perspective, ideally?
I'd want to hear your pitch, honestly, because you've made a compelling argument for Alec Burks because he has been at times one of the more important pieces. Yeah, you can say like in the grand scheme, he isn't the most important player for the Knicks, but he has made a case as a key piece to what you guys are doing this season because I never want to seem too greedy here because if you want to look at, let's say like the Karis LeVert deal, it'd probably be if Indiana is hellbent and determined to fully embrace a rebuild, it'd be Ricky Rubio. Maybe it's a younger fringe piece and a first round pick. I think Cleveland is more than comfortable with giving up their first round pick, especially if it's lottery protected this year, because at this point, the Cavs do not need to be adding more young talent to their rotation. They need to add adults or guys in their mid to late 20s that can kind of just support this quasi big three they built in Garland, Mobley, and Allen at this point. So I kind of want to hear what you have to pick. I think maybe Cedi Osman's contract would grease the wheels a little bit. I know Bleacher Report's Jake Fisher has reported that a few teams have already called about Cedi Osman's availability, and I wonder, because at this point, if you're to trade any of these pieces in Cleveland's rotation, whether it is Isaac Okoro, whether it is Cedi Osman, or anyone on the roster not named Garland, Mobley, or Allen, is it a clear talent upgrade? Because you're not only going to be rocking the rotation, you're going to be rocking the boat in terms of chemistry as well for this Cavs team. And like the Cavs are like the proponents of good vibes. Like for some reason, somehow, some way, they've gotten Kevin Love to fully buy into this team this year. And do you really want to go out and say, okay, let's trade Cedi Osman? I mean, I think draft picks are just ammunition to make a trade happen at this point. Do you really want to rock the boat chemistry wise? And I want to hear what your pitch is, because I think, Cedi Osman in a first, the Cavs might do that for Alec Burks if they really truly believe this is a talent upgrade. So I want to hear what your pitch is, and maybe we can somehow come to a trade that's agreeable on both ends.
All right, guys, it's about that time. Let's take our first break with Evan and tell you about TurboTax. People think unusual circumstances mean complicated taxes, but for TurboTax Live experts, that's what makes things interesting. We all have unique lives, whether you're investing in crypto for the first time this year, own an up-and-coming small business, or are raising rambunctious twins. Luckily, TurboTax Live has experts who can answer your tax questions, walk you through the whole process, or do your taxes for you from start to finish. That's probably the option I'm going to pick. They help you get every deduction you deserve, no matter your unique situation, and you can talk to a TurboTax Live expert through your phone or computer without leaving your house. TurboTax Live experts are here to help you however you need, and if you need an extra hand your taxes off to them and they'll do it for you. The TurboTax Live experts, an interesting life can mean an even greater refund. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. You do your thing, they've got your taxes. Intuit TurboTax Live. Yeah, I think Cedi Osman and something analogous to what the Knicks got from the Charlotte Hornets in the draft this past year, like a pretty heavily protected first round pick, maybe like top 20 protected for 2 years, then top 16 protected for 1 year, and then turns into 2 seconds. Like something along those lines, I think
That
are
could be
fair.
doable, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
think that could be doable.
yeah, I mean, because Burks is someone who on the court and off the court just doesn't rock the boat. I think that is his appeal to contenders more than anything else. Like he does everything just competently enough and gives you just enough of a ceiling that he can swing a single playoff game for you. Or conversely, on a night where he's not having a good game, still very capable of hitting a big three. Like he just doesn't really take anything off the table. And when you canvass the NBA for options that you can get with a sub-lottery first-round pick, I don't think there are too many guys you can say that about. So that would be my case for Alec Burks.
I think that's doable because I mean, obviously, if you're looking at just last night's game against Milwaukee, Cedi Osman was an integral piece to what the Cavs were doing. He shot an ungodly amount, Utah Jazzian, if you will. If you're a Cavs fan, you know, because Cedi wants the Cavs to shoot threes like the Jazz do, but he's been kind of a peak and valley player his entire time with Cleveland, but I think he's just a locker room favorite because he's close with Kevin Love. It's weird to say he's one of the more tenured Cavaliers as well, because I don't know if you want to give up on him just yet, but he's kind of tanked a little bit since Ricky Rubio was sidelined. Granted, Cedi was out with COVID, but it became apparent because the way JV Bickerstaff deployed Cedi Osman this year it was always in tandem with Ricky Rubio because the playmaking Rubio provides and just the cerebral ability in terms of just like being a chess master on the floor, just getting Cedi easy looks helps a lot too. And maybe if you want to sell high on that potential in that 3-point shooting, that's one of your more available assets. And if, like you said, Alec Burks doesn't really rock the boat, I think that really just kind of levels out what the Cavs are looking for in terms of just bench depth. Maybe it's starting as well if you want to plug him in as the starting two next to Darius Garland. Yeah, Alec Burks is just a player that really intrigues me, and if he isn't available as the deadline heats up, like you've said, you've made a compelling argument for him as one of the more important players for the Knicks. If he's available, I think it'd be remiss of Cleveland not to try and swing a trade for him, and it just depends on what New York is willing to give up in terms of just a trade in general, because like it's tricky because it's not 2K. I've come to learn that just talking to executives throughout the league. It's just not like teams calling up saying like, hey, we have these players and we want this from you and maybe some picks as well. These are gradual conversations that evolve over time. And if Alec Burks somehow becomes available, it would be remiss of Cleveland not to reunite with a wing who I thought was pretty good during his time with Cleveland, and I think would be a very, very good asset for the Cavs if they were somehow able to get him.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to see what the Knicks' approach is going into this trade deadline. We're doing these shows operating as if they're going to be sellers. Alex and I certainly think it's wise that they're sellers given the way they played recently. I don't necessarily know if that will be their final approach, but assuming that they are, two other guys I want to quickly mention before we wrap up here. Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker. Fournier, a guy who was initially a disaster in his Knicks tenure. A lot of reasons for it, though. Like not a lot going right around him. Like coming off a summer where he played for the French national team, I believe. Like late last season, he had COVID. Like a lot of factors, and now he's pretty much back to who he's been for most of his career in the month of January. 15 points, 3 boards, 2 assists, 45% from the field, 45% from three. And he has turned himself again into a guy who is a solid secondary option, a little bit different than Alec Burks in that I would say he has a higher ceiling offensively and maybe a little bit of a higher ceiling as a scorer. Not quite the same defender, not quite as consistent, at least this year, as Alec Burks. Obviously, throughout his career, he has been the better player. And then Kemba Walker, more of a rental, obviously, and someone who, outside of one 5-game stretch, which was sort of his FU Tibbs tour, when he got back off the bench, and he dropped a 44.9 rebound, 8 assist game over that run. He's by and large not been very good in New York, but I think at this point he's ultimately miscast as a starting point guard, especially one who has to play off of a ball dominant forward in Julius Randle in Cleveland. And maybe this doesn't work with Rajon Rondo there, but I kind of think you could slot him into the role that maybe Colin Sexton ideally should have been playing as kind of a spark plug off the bench. But Evan, do either of those names have any appeal to you at all? All right, it's about that time. Let's take our second final break, come back with Evan, and wrap up this fantastic conversation on a potential Knicks Cavs trade. All right, NBA fans, are you looking for daily fantasy options for the NBA? Then you need to try the award-winning app Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. I love it, and we all know you will too. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected number. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Prize Picks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Prize Picks offers any prop you can think of, from points scored to rebounds, even steals. Prize Picks allows mixed sport entries, so you can do something Knicks and Super Bowl related. May I recommend Julius Randle, more turnovers than Matthew Stafford interceptions? That's an easy one. And Prize Picks doesn't just offer NBA. They have options on college basketball, college football, NFL, MLB, soccer, MMA, and more. For a limited time, Prize Picks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. You can get $50 for free if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point, but you must use code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. Sign up today and use code NBA for $50 for free if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point. And now back with Evan.
Well, when you look at Fournier's long-term contract, that's where the appeal kind of runs out for me a little bit. He is 29. He is being paid long-term. Yes, the last year of his contract is a team option, but do you really want to swallow that contract until you get to that point? Kemba always intrigues me. I think, yeah, he would make sense as a spark plug. I think like you said, maybe the Rondo factor mitigates things a little bit, but Rondo's also in his mid-30s, has a ton of mileage on his body, has been out with a hamstring injury, and I don't think you can reliably say he's available on a night-to-night basis for the Cavs. So if you're able to get Kemba Walker just to act as a scoring punch off the bench for the Cavs, I don't see the issue with that either. Like you said, maybe I think asking him to play starting point guard minutes is asking a little too much of him at this point. But if you're asking him to come off the bench as a spark plug to provide some playmaking, some scoring, just a little bit of everything, there's a little bit of a defensive loss in terms of playing Kemba, obviously. I think that's part of the reason why the Knicks benched him, more or less. You can correct me if I'm wrong at this point, but the defensive upside in terms of Kemba is just not there. And JB Bickerstaff is a defense first coach, but with Colin Sexton, you're not getting a lot of defense either to begin with. So if you're just asking for that scoring punch, just come off the bench. Yeah, if you can get Kemba for a relatively team-friendly trade, I don't see the issue with that, because I don't think he's going to rock the boat too much either, just because he's going to be on a quasi-playoff team. He's going to be part of something that matters, I think. And I wonder if maybe Cleveland's culture is too strong at this point to kill, that if you bring in somebody like Kemba Walker, he's not going to rock the boat too much, and he'll be able to play meaningful basketball no matter where he ends up in Cleveland's rotation. So I wouldn't hate getting Kemba Walker. Just Fournier's contract is what gives me pause. If he wasn't being paid so long, yeah, 3-point shooting is always a good thing in modern basketball, so why not? But it's just the length of that contract is just maybe not so much.
Fair enough. I think that's as good of a note as any to end on. Evan, I noted the many places you work. You're a busy guy, but before I send you away, I'm anything else you want to let people know about? I know it's on the graphic, but for people listening, where they can find you on social media and all of that.
Yeah. Always follow me on Twitter on @Evan. I cover the Cavs, like Gavin mentioned. I also try to do some Browns and Guardians coverage as well for Meta Bulletins right down Euclid. If you somehow like listening to my monotone ramblings about this team, my buddy Chris Manning and I do this 5 days a week over on Locked On Cavs. If you want to check us out on YouTube, that'd be great. Check us out anywhere you can find your podcast. That'd be great as well. But Yeah, no, check out the work Gavin is doing at Locked On Knicks. Obviously, this is their feed, so if you're listening, you're already checking them out. But no, support them as much as you can. Check out anyone on Locked On. I think all 30 teams are bumping coverage at this point. It's a fun time, and it's growing like crazy.
There might be a little bit of background resentment just because of the lottery luck that Cleveland has had, but as fun of a team as any in the
I don't know what
NBA.
you're talking about, man. The
I don't
Cavs
know.
have the most unfortunate. The Zion Williamson draft
Right.
absolutely just
Yeah.
ruined.
Tough year.
Just ignore
Anyways,
the LeBron James, Kyrie Irving factor. It's just been rough times in Cleveland
it's
all
been
around
tough.
the
Yeah.
draft.
Kevin Love all of a sudden working out. But anyways, tough luck in Cleveland, but an incredibly fun team to watch. If Knicks fans are looking for a bandwagon squad to jump on, you can do worse than the Cleveland Cavaliers. You can certainly do worse than checking out Chris and Evan, who do a fantastic job on Locked On Cavs.